So what we're after today is to talk about this interagency fuels treatment decision support system. And I really love this little theme here, that a picture is worth 1,000 words. And I think you'll see that throughout. And the idea is that we use this tool for fuels treatment planning, but we're really doing everything based on a map, and visualizing this stuff on a map. So that's sort of the theme. So keep that in mind as we go through this. And of course, LANDFIRE is the foundation of what we use in IFTDSS for our landscape data, our fuels data, all of our elevation and slope aspect, all that good stuff that comes from LANDFIRE. So we have been tracking with LANDFIRE for many years, and you'll see as we walk through this that we wouldn't be here without them. So that's a partnership that we hope has been long and really good over the years. So that will continue, I'm certain. Okay, let me jump to some introductions. Josh Hyde is here with us. Josh works for the University of Idaho, but we have had an agreement with the university for, going on 10, 12 years now. And Josh is the brains and the talent behind our online help system and our user support system. So when you send in a ticket or have a technical question, Josh is typically the person that answers those. And if you've looked through any of our online help, he has developed that. I mean, we've helped him, but he is pretty much the brains behind it. So super excited to have Josh here today. He's going to be watching the chat. If you guys have some questions, please feel free as I'm talking to put those in the chat, and I'll try to stop throughout and we can answer some of those questions as we go.
Well, thanks.
Yeah, you bet, Josh. Great to have you. And then also Wendy Detwiler. She is not on the call today, but she's a new employee with us at the RD&A group. And she is a technical specialist. She just came from the Deschutes National Forest and just started with us a couple months ago. But I have a presentation. It's about a 9-minute little example of how she's used IFTDSS in her work there on the Deschutes before she came to us here at the RD&A. So Wendy was not able to make the call, but we want to show her example. So we'll be playing that short little video for y'all as we get to that point. Okay, so what I want to do is do a little intro of IFTDSS, talk about how people are using it in the field, and then tell y'all how to find out more. So let's go ahead and get started. So IFTDSS, what is it? Well, we started this a long time ago, actually way back in 2007. Our current version that y'all are looking at today was deployed originally in 2017. So it's been around for a little while, and we're continuing. We have a small development team. We have a contract with IBM, and they have been building as we go. Every year we add new things. So it's constantly improving. But the premise, of course, was to take this myriad of tools and applications and systems that are out there in the world and try to pick and choose the ones that people use the most and put them into a web-based platform. So it's a one-stop shop, easy for people to use these tools rather than having to go to 25 different places. And also this risk-based treatment, fuels treatment decision-making, of course, is those words we use throughout our business these days. And, aligning that with the data we have from wildfires, whether it's fire history or how fuels treatments affect wildfires, and putting that all together so we can make better fuels treatment planning decisions and use this system to do that. And then finally, which is for me, is actually my most favorite part of IFTDSS, is getting these tools into the hands of users early in their career. We've got a different generation of folks coming up these days. Everyone's very tech savvy, as y'all know, and we really should be having folks use these spatial tools much earlier in their career than we have in the past. So I think IFTDSS really facilitates that, given its easy user interface, and for those of us who are not GIS experts, it puts those tools at their fingertips to learn and utilize them in their work. So that's why we're using IFTDSS these days. IFTDSS is designed to work at the project and the unit level. There are other tools that work at the regional and national scale, but we really want IFTDSS to be at that at that unit level. And that can vary, right? Whether you're a park or a BLM district or a state, maybe you work for a state and you have either the whole state or a portion of a district of some kind. And then down to the project level. So if you have an individual project, a burn plan, maybe you're doing, or some sort of mechanical treatment in a NEPA, project area, something like that. But we can go up to 12 million acres now as far as landscapes. I'll show you that here in a minute. But we can also scale way down to, a 100 or 200 acre burn unit. So it does vary between those levels. But we'll leave the regional and national to other tools. We've got about 4,000 plus users these days, broken down between about 70-30 with government and non-government. So we have quite a few of non-government folks using IFTDSS, and IFTDSS is open to everybody. Anybody can get an account. If you're not government, then you can use a login.gov method of setting up an account. And then, of course, we're open to all the federal agencies and state, county, pretty much anybody. We like everybody to be able to use it. So we're going to continue to make that the case as we go forward. So IFTDSS is being used for a lot of different things. I'm going to highlight 3 things today. Some NEPA planning, prescribed fire plans, and some community wildfire protection plans. Those are the big ones, I think. A lot more folks are starting to use IFTDSS for risk assessment work, hazard analysis, prioritizing their fuels treatments and things like that. So there's a myriad of things out there, but I really want to highlight these 3 main projects today. So I'm going to show you some examples from each of those. But first, what I want to do is do a quick demo. I just want to show you the system and do a very brief click around and show you kind of the basics. Then we'll come back to the slides and we'll talk more about these case studies. So I'm going to switch over to IFTDSS here. And let's see. Randy, did I do that right? Can you see that tab, or do I need to change that in Zoom?
Looks good, Kim. Thank you.
Okay. So you're looking at the IFTDSS planning cycle. And I've already logged into IFTDSS. So what I want to show you real quick is the help system, of course. If you click under help at the top and go to the help center, you come to our help center page, and this is where you can find answers to all kinds of questions you might have. So if you're just getting started and you want to learn how to use the workspace, you can just track with the drop-down menus on the left. There's lots of videos like this that'll walk you through different things. There's tutorials. You can see there's little walkthroughs. There is just a million good things about our help system. So I encourage everybody who's new to this to use the help system to find what you're looking for. We also have recorded webinars. There's tutorials. There's all kinds of stuff in here. So if you're not sure, use the help system, see if you can find an answer. And then if you need to, you can always request support if you're still needing help. But once you log into IFTDSS, we start off with our planning cycle. And the idea behind that is kind of the adaptive management cycle, right? So we evaluate our landscapes, we do some strategic planning, we implement those plans, we monitor, we report, and then we start over. That's the whole idea behind the planning cycle. And then with our map studio kind of sitting right in the middle as far as it being map-based. So if I click on, you can see the navigation bar at the top here. If I go to the cycle, and we start off in landscape evaluation and get back to our LANDFIRE partnership, right? If we want to create a landscape, that's always the first thing we need to do in order to start working in IFTDSS. So and I'll show you some of these here in just a minute. I'll just walk through the navigation first. So we can create landscapes, we can get some summaries about those landscapes, and then we can edit our landscapes if we find out that there's some things that aren't just quite right and we need to adjust based on what we know is on the ground. And then we also have our modeling fire behavior. So we'll talk through some of the models in IFTDSS as well. There's a workspace in here, and this is basically a place where you save everything. So you can see I've got a whole pile of folders over here, And then within those folders are all my different files, my shapes, my shape files, my reports, my model outputs. And you can see anytime I hover over one of these, you get all the information about that file on the right-hand side. You can also click on these and then you can do different things with them. You can view them on a map. You can download them. Most things in IFTDSS are downloadable and can be used in a GIS. You can delete, you can move them. We have a way of filtering over here on the upper left. So we tried to make the workspace as easy to navigate as possible as far as finding things. And then we have our map studio. I'm going to come back to that because we're going to spend a little bit of time in there. But I'm going to skip here to the playground, which is where we actually set up our model runs. So you can see we have 3 models in here, and I'm going to show you examples of each of these. But this is where we do our modeling, is in the playground. So let me jump back over to the map studio. And you can see when we click on that, we end up at our kind of our US level scale here. And then if you're not sure, if you're just getting started, you can zoom around. I'm going to zoom in here. If you click the shift key and then draw a box, I'm going to zoom into Boise just because it's kind of an easy place to find things. So here we are in Boise, Idaho. And now we can start doing different things. We can add layers. We can upload shape files if we have a project area that we want to upload. We can go click our landscape tools and we can draw a landscape. And this is where it's going to go out and get LANDFIRE data for that area. Very simple. You can click a box here, draw a box. You can tell it which LANDFIRE version I'd like to choose from. And we've got everything back to 2012. All the way up to 2022, which is the most recent data set. Of course, that's just available for the West right now. And then you can pick your fuel model type. You can go back to the old 13 if you'd like. You give it a name, and then you find it a place to live in one of your folders, or you can create a new folder. So that's kind of how the landscape tools work. I'll show you one. This is kind of like the Martha Stewart version where I've already baked the lasagna. So I'm going to pull it out of the oven here. So I'll go to a landscape. Let me just pick one. I've been helping some folks here on the Payette who've been doing some modeling. I'm going to go pick their landscape right now. Let's view that on the map. So you can see this is a landscape just south of Cascade, Idaho. This is a landscape that was pulled from LANDFIRE. I think it was 2020. And I can add some layers. So they've got some shape files in here that they're working on a prescribed burn. So we'll zoom into that. And those shape files will show up on the landscape here in just a second. And then we can edit this landscape if we need to make some changes. If we don't like some of the fuel models that are in here and we need to fix them, we can do some editing like I showed you in the cycle. So that's kind of how the map works. You can click on the Identify tool and decide that I need to identify any pixel. So if I click on a pixel, I will get some results as far as what that is in that pixel. So you can see I've got an elevation, a slope, aspect, what the fuel model is, all those good things that come with our landscapes from LANDFIRE are all here in the click list. We also have an ability to use our little swipe tool. If I had a layer underneath here, I could swipe back and forth and look at some different layers on top of each other, get an idea of how things are changed or how they relate. And then we have a new feature that's recently new, a map bookmark, where you can say, I want to save this map so I can come back to this without having to turn a whole bunch of things on and off. I can just create a new one, give it a name, and then it'll save in my workspace. And if I want to jump right back to this map, the way I've laid it out, I can do that with the bookmark. So that's kind of a cool feature too. Let's see. So then we have some other things in our workspace. I'm going to use the filter tool here on the left and go to a report. And within IFTDSS, after you create a landscape, you can get a report on it. So IFTDSS creates reports for you to show you summaries. So that landscape I just showed you, this is a report showing the fuel models within those shapefiles. So you can see it's got a map. It's got some breakdown of all the fuel models here. You get different summaries. You can actually get the data you can download. and then you break down into the different layers within the landscape. So those are some of the summary reports. We can also do this for fire. So in this case, we've done a 97th percentile fire behavior run. We can look at the output there, and then we can also go back and look at the report for this. So I can show you the report there. Let's see, did I do one? I think I did. View the summary on that. And you can see this also includes the report for the fire behavior. So here's flame length. That would be flame length within those shape files. So that's the reporting feature in IFTDSS. Okay, so that's kind of what I wanted to cover with a very quick navigation sort of to show you how this works around the cycle. You can go to the different parts of the cycle, and this is where we would do our strategic planning. And I'm going to talk about some of these elements of the cycle when I show you those examples of some of those case studies. So let me stop there. Josh, any questions that have come up just yet?
So far, just one on availability in other countries. And I know right now we've just got US supported.
That's right. We only have data because, like I said, LANDFIRE is the basis for all of this. And of course, we only have our LANDFIRE data in the US. We are going to be adding the ability to upload your own landscape in the future. So I believe as long as that landscape data is set up the same way that a LANDFIRE landscape is set up, you could upload that data probably from anywhere, as long as the models, if you're trying to do fire behavior, are as long as the landscapes, they work the same way, because the models run off of those fuel models and stuff in LANDFIRE. So there will be the ability to upload your own landscape in the future, probably sometime this winter is when we're hoping to get there. So that's what I know right now anyway.
Might be something to watch. I know they've talked back and forth about whether or not it would support external areas of interest or not. So
yeah, I think, and then we are still in discussing that. So I think we'll know more as that functionality is developed, whether we can use that outside of the US or not. But it's a great question. And we do get asked that question often.
For sure.
So okay, so can you guys see my slides now, Josh? Are you seeing my slideshow again?
Yep.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and bring back the slides. And the other thing I wanted to show you, it's easier to show you on a slide than on the live demo here, is a function we have about map values, and where you can set up a map, and then we have a whole list of resources available in the IFTDSS reference data layers that speak to values. So you can see here, this is a map of values that's showing population, low density, moderate, and high density population. We can look at grazing allotments. There's a whole bunch of different choices in IFTDSS that are based on these national level highly valued resources and assets from the National Risk Assessment database. So that's what's available in IFTDSS, that you can turn those layers on and off, set up your own value set. You can also upload your own. So if you have local values that you want to capture, you can upload those shape files as well and include in your data set. That's what this user data piece is for, this is nice, because if you're doing a risk assessment, I'm going to show you an example from this community wildfire protection plan that used some of these values as well. So it's a great tool to incorporate into any of your planning. Okay, so the fire behavior models, let me kind of whip through this real quick just to show you how the fire behavior models work. Again, this goes back to the picture worth 1,000 words, right? So, we want to show our fire behavior on the map. I think, we go back in time to behave and nomograms and all those non-spatial tools that we still have available to us, but taking those and really displaying our fire behavior on the map, to me, is it's super educational. I find that teaching some of the basic fire classes that we teach by showing these things on the map to people who are new to fire behavior really drives the message home for them, and it helps them really understand the concepts of this fire behavior modeling more so than we do with just a graphical program, say like Behave, where you don't actually get a spatial view of it. So in IFTDSS, we have this basic spatial fire behavior model, and then we have a spread model. So I'll talk about those here in just a second. I'll go through each one. So this is what you get in Behave, of course, right? You put in your inputs, your fuel moistures, your wind speeds, etc., and you run them, and then you get numbers and you get tables. So the idea is to take the same, elements of this and then really put it on a map. So in the landscape fire behavior section of IFTDSS, which is probably most similar to what you get in Behave, you can see the inputs we have. We pick our landscape, we enter our wind speeds and our wind direction. We can pick a crown fire method, and then we can adjust moisture content. That's a little advanced there. But then we put our regular fuel moistures in, just like we would in Behave. These are all the same inputs you would do in Behave. You save your run, and then you hit go, hit run, and then you'll get this output here, which again is, and we're looking at flame length in this case, but you get rate of spread and fire line intensity as well. So you get the same outputs, but now we get to see it spatially, which to me is just critical. In this case, this is a burn unit in southern Idaho. And if I'm writing a burn plan, I want to see what the fire behavior is outside of the burn unit. And this really gives me an idea of what that's going to look like. Again, you can use that identify tool and click on the map, and then you get all the parameters for each of the pixels as far as what your flame length is, your rate of spread, all of those parameters, as well as your inputs as well. So you get to see what you put in for fuel moistures, et cetera. So that's the basic landscape fire behavior model. This is another application of it, same burn unit, and these are the reports that I showed you as far as what you get from the report section. And then this is the minimum travel time. This is the fire spread model. So this comes from Flam Map. It's in a kind of an adjusted version of what you see in Flam Map. And again, this is a spread model. So now we're looking at pixel to pixel fire spread. And in this case, it also shows us the flow paths, which is usually the path of, quote, least resistance, burning through the fuel models across the map. It uses one set of weather. So if you're going to run more than 1 or 2 burn periods, you have to remember you're using the same weather. So sometimes you can run up to 5 burn periods, but of course you have to decide if that actually makes sense with a single weather stream. So and there's a bunch of help. Again, if you're new to some of these models, I really encourage everybody to read about them in the online help before you try to kind of use them in any sort of planning documents. Make sure you understand the limitations and such of these models. The third one is the landscape burn probability model. And again, this came from Flam Map as well, from the RANDIG model in Flam Map, adapted for IFTDSS. And this looks at the probability, the likelihood of a fire burning on your landscape. And this is what we use in risk assessments for the most part, or if you're doing some sort of exposure analysis. So basically what the model does is you give it a worst case weather scenario, and then it runs as many fires as it'll take until it's burned 98% of the landscape. So a minimum of 1,000 fires, but it could be upwards of hundreds of thousands of fires, depending on how big your landscape is. And that gives you a probability of each of those pixels burning. You also get a conditional flame length, which is the mean flame length. And then when you put those two pieces together, the third output you get is this hazard output. And that's a combination of the flame length and the probability. So you can see, based on these little burn units in here, I can start making some decisions about where is the highest hazard. And that would, of course, be in the red and orange zones versus the lower hazard, based on these two things, probability and flame length. And again, this is a lot of what we use in our risk assessment work. So let me stop there. Josh, any questions on the models?
None yet on the models.
Okay. The third part of IFTDSS here, that we can take the models now and we can look at them. We can compare them side by side, which becomes really helpful when you're trying to compare different scenarios. So in this case, we've got our 3 outputs, and this is based on 3 different prescriptions used say for a burn plan, for example. But you could do this with any of the models, as do the comparison. So that's a nice feature in IFTDSS that lets you look at things next to each other. Okay, so for prescribed fire planning, I'm just going to run through a quick example here of using this in prescribed fire plans. Again, that picture worth 1,000 words. If you're taking a summary report and looking at your fuel models, you could put that into your burn plan, and rather than having a bunch of text, we can throw a picture in. And to me, as a reader of a burn plan, that is enormously helpful to be able to see the images there and the breakdown versus trying to synthesize it through a chart or a table. You can use it in a prescription, like I mentioned. Again, this side by side, different prescription parameters, low, moderate, high, etc. We use it for holding in the organization and equipment units or sections of a burn plan. Again, from this burn plan, you can see some distances to a boundary. That's what this blue line is showing. That might come into play and be important in my holding concerns here. So IFTDSS, again, looking at that wildfire rate of spread outside of my burn unit can be a really critical piece of a holding plan. And then we can game out some spot fires using that minimum travel time fire spread. So if I want to know, well, how big can a spot fire get under a certain weather condition, I could game that out for my burn unit under different prescription parameters to see how fast it might spread based on a single weather scenario. A good way to confirm your contingency and your holding plans. So that's sort of the burn plan use of IFTDSS that I've seen most often. I'm sure people have other creative ways of using some of these things. So the next thing I want to show you is just some examples of some NEPA. And this is where Wendy Detwiler, our new employee for the RD&A, when she came to us from the Deschutes, she was working on some projects there in Central Oregon. And we have different functions in IFTDSS that help you compare treatment alternatives. And she has some examples of using it for pre-planning and how she's worked with some folks in the Central Oregon area to kind of key them into some things to consider as they go into their NEPA planning process. So this is a little case study from the Crescent Ranger District. Here's Bend, Oregon, and then her project area was down here in the left corner near this Crescent Lake. So I'm going to go ahead and stop and let Randy pull up a video for us, and we can listen to Wendy talk about her project here on the Deschutes.
All right, thanks, Kim. Yes, everyone. Wendy kindly made a video for us. So in testing with Kim and Josh, the audio seemed to work really well, but please turn your volume up and let me know right away if it doesn't work. So here goes, sharing screen now with audio enabled. And I think I selected the wrong screen. Hold on, sorry about that.
And I think this is about 8 minutes long, so.
All right, let me know if you're the audio, Kim.
Okay.
Hello, I'm Wendy Detwiler.
Yep, that's good. We'll just turn up the volume a little.
RD&A. And I'm working with the Interagency Fuels Treatment Decision Support System team, IFTDSS, as a fire management specialist. Today I'll be talking about how I used IFTDSS when I was working at a Forest Service district. Before starting with the WFM RD&A, I worked on the Crescent Ranger District of the Deschutes National Forest as a district fuels planner, and before that, the district fuels AFMO. There are a lot of ways that IFTDSS can be helpful for fuels treatment planning and analysis, but I want to talk about how I used IFTDSS in a way to bring project ideas to NEPA interdisciplinary teams, IDTs. NEPA, most simply, is a law that requires federal agencies to take a hard look at the environmental effects of their proposed actions before making decisions. Though IDTs can function in many ways, discussions generally include purpose and need for the proposed action, alternative actions to those proposed actions, and the environmental impacts of the proposed actions and alternatives. Before this discussion happens, though, you gotta take your idea to the district or forest NEPA IDT and present it. IFTDSS is a great way to share your ideas and present your proposed projects visually. I find that providing multiple possible treatment alternatives in the beginning and showing the outcomes of those treatments compared to no treatment on your landscape can help the other resource specialists to better understand and visualize your project. Welcome to Crescent Ranger District on the Deschutes National Forest, Oregon. My proposed project that I was presenting to the IDT was for a series of shaded fuel breaks with the purpose of reducing hazardous fuel loads, as well as provide for future maintenance of those fuel breaks, provide safer egress and ingress for the public, employees, and fire personnel, create defensible space that could be used to aid suppression tactics in the event of a wildfire, and to purposely design these fuel treatments to protect forest resources such as wildlife, timber, and heritage. The need for this project is to prepare the land to protect all resources in the event of a catastrophic wildfire. To do this, we would use past, current, and future projects to link shaded fuel breaks together. There is a need to be proactive with pre-wildfire event planning, treatment, and maintenance. This allows fuel specialists to strategically place and implement treatments in locations that would be advantageous during an emergency, while taking the time to apply techniques to protect resources such as wildlife habitat, heritage sites, rare plants, timber, recreational opportunities, and others. By being proactive with pre-wildfire event planning, projects can protect the resource by treating the land with precision, which will benefit the landscape when a fire occurs and aid a Type 1 or Type 2 fire management team. I spent a lot of time preparing for the IDT presentation. To help explain the project to the team members, I used IFTDSS to run models and simulations that would help me quantify the landscape before and after a variety of possible treatments, as well as show the fire behavior without treatment and after treatment. In IFTDSS, I created my landscape, which was the watershed in which the project was located. I worked with the district hydrologist to decide which level watershed would be most appropriate to use. Then I ran a basic landscape fire behavior run, MTT fire spread, and landscape burn probability. I will share the run results in the following slides. Here you can see my IFTDSS landscape and the identified watersheds for this project. Keep in mind that you are presenting an idea and that the team over time will change the project so it meets the needs of all resources. The landscape defines your project area and is the first input needed to run most models in IFTDSS. First, I familiarized myself with the basic fire behavior of the project area as a whole. The landscape fire behavior run is useful in prioritizing treatment areas. It can be viewed spatially in IFTDSS, or you can export it for use in ArcMap and ArcPro. This model provides flame length, rate of spread, fire line intensity, heat per unit area, crown fire activity, and a bunch more. Here you can see flame length in my project area. Just so you know, the northwest side of Crescent Lake has a whole bunch of residences. This, along with field surveys, helped me to plan where treatments would be beneficial. Landscape burn probability quantifies the relative likelihood and intensity of a fire occurring under a fixed set of weather and fuel moisture conditions. 97 percentile weather conditions for Crescent District were calculated using 20 years of Black Rock RAWS data. Climatology-based percentile levels are used to describe the average and extreme conditions for a specified area. The following modeling uses the 97th percentile or extreme conditions that occur on Crescent District. These are the slides that I presented to the IDT. Keep in mind that many of the team members don't have a lot of fire background, so I was careful as possible to explain fire terminology. In this slide, I explain what flame length is, how it's measured, and what suppression tactics are needed. Look at the no treatment alternative and see that much of the area within the treatment polygons, those red and black areas, is yellow and orange with a tiny bit of red. This means that those areas, flame length would be 4 to 8 feet and greater. In the treatment alternative, flame lengths are expected to be less than 4 feet. Here I display crown fire activity. I carefully explain what an active and passive crown fire are and how that is different from a surface fire. In the no treatment alternative, you can see that there is opportunity for passive crown fire, and in the treatment alternative, there is only surface fire expected. Here I show a model run for an ignition where we generally get ignitions under 97th percentile conditions. I remind the team members that the model does not take any suppression actions into account. This model is with no suppression activities. The key is that the treatment slow down spread by 1 to 2 days, which can provide precious time for people to evacuate and also for suppression resources to make a plan. The acreage may not be dramatically different, but the difference is in the fire behavior. Here you can see the same model run in terms of rate of spread and fire line intensity. In the no treatment alternative, fire line intensity is up to and greater than 500 BTUs, and in the treatment alternative, rate of spread has dramatically reduced in the treatment areas, and fire line intensity has dropped below 500 BTUs. Providing haul charts can also be useful to provide context for team members. Here is another example of an ignition that could start in a location that Crescent gets lots of ignitions each year, and this was modeled under 97th percentile conditions also. You can see on these slides that I've included the parameters that the models were run. Again, you can see that the shaded fuel breaks did not stop the fire progression, especially with no suppression actions, but it did slow it down. Just as in the previous model run, you can see the same model run in terms of rate of spread and fire line intensity. In the no treatment alternative, fire line intensity is up to and greater than 500 BTUs, and in the treatment alternative, rate of spread has dramatically reduced in the treatment areas, and the fire line intensity has dropped below 500 BTUs. This is how I used IFTDSS in preparing for an IDT meeting. There are lots of other models and processes in IFTDSS that can be used beyond what I mentioned. IFTDSS provided me with visuals and quantifiable data that can be very helpful in conveying ideas. Thanks and good luck.
So this is just a few other examples of those NEPA specialist reports, similar to what Wendy was talking to us about. Looking at, this one's from the Caribou Targhee, a good friend of mine, Deb Flowers, who works over there. Again, showing that change in crown fire potential based on your treatment using IFTDSS. And then here's two others. This is one from the Apache Sitgraves, again, showing changes in potential. And then another that was used in this area on the Deschutes, looking at different alternatives, existing conditions here on the left, and then several different alternatives based on fuels treatment. So lots of different uses. We've seen these in specialist reports being used more and more. And again, those visuals becoming really helpful for folks to really tell their story. I'm going to switch gears here just for a second and move over to a community wildfire protection plan, a CWPP. This was done for Sublette County in Wyoming, and Steve Markison is a consultant now, but he used to be the FMO there on the Bridger-Teton National Forest. And when he retired, he started his consulting business, has been doing quite a bit of work over in that Jackson Hole and Pinedale area of Wyoming, and helping those guys with some protection plans. So we're over here in Sublette County, just south of Jackson, and very rural communities down here, but definitely growing and definitely plenty of values to take into consideration. So Steve used IFTDSS throughout his project with the county in this, it's a very collaborative process, looking at local fire districts and talking with county commissioners and bringing the public in as well. So he found using a lot of the visuals, again, were very helpful. So he went through this sort of stepwise process. They identified these 40 different communities within the county that had values that were of great concern to wildfire. Looked at the fire treatment, both fuels treatment and wildfire history for the area, and had that mapped. And then from there, walked into sort of a process using IFTDSS to simulate some of this burn probability and look at some of the model outputs for flame length and rates of spread to come up with an exposure analysis. So we started and walked through these several steps here. So the first step was looking at that landscape burn probability. and then mapping those values, like I talked about earlier, which produced these couple of maps. So these are countywide maps right now, and he's got some very zoomed in versions of these for each of the critical areas. But you can see this is a map of Sublette County. It's about 3.5 million acres for the county. So IFTDSS can handle that size of a landscape. So this is looking at flame length across the county under fire season conditions with his values, his communities mapped on here as well. And then again, running the landscape burn probability and looking at that hazard measurement, looking at conditional flame length married up with burn probability to see where each of these communities lands as far as low to high hazard. And this whole plan is available on the Sublette County website. It's been approved and is an ongoing plan available to view if you'd like. Then the next step he went to was this exposure analysis, which was to get them to some mitigation measures and strategies. So once they sort of ranked things as far as hazard rating and exposure, then they were able to look at challenges and opportunities for them to help mitigate some of these issues for each of these communities and each of these areas that had values of concern, and bringing the public in to talk about, validating these things on the map and helping them understand, did we capture everything that was important to everybody? And then taking these mitigation measures and really educating, whether it's a local area to help educate on defensible space, or working with the fire districts to do larger scale fuels treatments to protect a subdivision. Those are all included in their wildfire protection plan. And of course, these always need to be reviewed, and they do have an action plan that should be an ongoing sort of living document. But you can view this whole plan if you'd like at the Sublette County, Wyoming website and see how they used IFTDSS to incorporate these outputs into their plan. It's a pretty good one. We've also helped the folks at Zion National Park do a risk assessment, and they're still working on this. But you can see some of the risk assessment outputs. So this is for the entire park. And then looking at that net threat versus net benefit in a place like Zion, where they may allow a fire to do its natural work and in areas of the park that makes sense. So this type of risk assessment using IFTDSS is helping them identify some of those areas where they can make some management decisions. So that's pretty much what I have for the IFTDSS presentation. I can show you very quickly just a couple things on where to find information. So let me scoot ahead here to that. How can I learn more? We've got lots of different choices. I already talked about the Help Center. We have 2 story maps. One is an overview of IFTDSS, and then one is for Yosemite National Park. And Jennifer Anderson, who's the prescribed fire specialist there, used IFTDSS to do some prescribed fire planning in the park. They were able to implement the plans and then show some of the results from their monitoring. And that's all captured here in this other story map about protecting some of the giant sequoia trees in the Mariposa Grove. We've got a whole pile of recorded webinars on the IFTDSS site, a whole variety of different topics there. We've got some downloadable flyers. You can read some, synopsis of these different things you can do in IFTDSS and different processes that we have now available. We've got several online courses in the Wildland Fire Learning Portal. 2 are right on the on-demand self-enroll. So you just help yourself to these. There's an overview, which goes over all the basic elements of IFTDSS and how to use them. So it's a self-study course. Anybody can sign up for this and just take it at your leisure. And then we have another one that's specific to using IFTDSS for prescribed fire plans. And you can see it walks through the different parts of a burn plan, from prescription to holding, and then how to put those outputs into your burn plan. So those are 2 courses on the portal, the Wildland Fire Learning Portal. We're building one for risk assessment. Hopefully we'll have that available sometime this winter. Getting some help from Oregon State on that one. And then we're also have some workshop materials that we're going to make available. So if someone wants to hold their own workshop, we'll have all that information available for folks to grab onto and host their own. We're also incorporating IFTDSS in a whole bunch of NWCG courses, mostly in the burn boss classes. We've held probably 7 courses that include IFTDSS, and in the S390, which is new and being rewritten, incorporating some of the spatial work into those courses. So as people start in their fire career, hopefully they'll start seeing this spatial work in these classes as they kind of grow through their career.
So Inga asks a great question. Do you ever get feedback on land fire fuels or topography data from users? And I'll tag on to that. Do you get any feedback on any of the land fire data? Would love to hear about that.
Yeah, we do. People will contact us and say, "Hey, I'm working on this. You know, I'm having some issues getting my fire behavior to match what I'm expecting." You know, and we'll talk them through how to do some editing. I think a lot of it comes down to education, to understand that, you know, you need to scrutinize your landscape and make sure all your disturbances are captured and things like that. So I don't think we really get, and Josh, jump in here if you think of other things too, but we don't get specific, like, you know, like this fuel model needs to be changed or this is wrong in my area. I don't think we get a lot of that so much. I think it's more of a general educational piece about understanding the need to edit and adjust and really validate your fuel models. Primarily fuel models are what folks are after with IFTDSS, as far as all the different choices that are available with LANDFIRE. Would you agree, Josh? I can't think of real specific things or regions of the country that we've had particular issues with.
Yeah, I'd agree. We don't tend to get much on that in the support desk itself. I've had a couple conversations with folks, but even then, it's just kind of more general, where folks like to see the most up-to-date info they can. And I think the only specific area I'd heard about is this complexity in pinyon juniper woodlands, but didn't get into a whole lot of depth there on the ins and outs of that. So yeah, it's pretty rare that we'll get feedback on the actual landscape files.
Yeah, and I think we also, yeah, it is a good question. We do get questions about the different landscapes that are available in IFTDSS, you know, the different years. People are really excited about having that disturbance update annually now. You know, if, you know, we have the 2022 data coming online, which everyone's like, oh, that's great. It's only a year off of what I'm, you know, in the past, it's always been, you know, multiple, I've had to go back 4 years or whatever. And having that 1-year disturbance update, I think, is a total game changer. I think people are really excited about that part.
Great. Kim, another question from Brett. Thanks, Brett. Ignition pattern can have a large influence on fire behavior during a prescribed burn. Are there any plans in the future to add ignition pattern function to the IFTDSS fire behavior / spread models?
That is a question for our modeling gurus that develop these models, actually. We do work with the folks from the fire lab and the folks who've developed, you know, say Flam Map, and that's where we get our models from. So, you know, currently ignition pattern is not captured in any of the fire spread models that we use. But I do know, as you know, Mark Finney and company are working on some new fire spread, you know, modeling. I don't know when that stuff will come online. You know, I think it's going to be sooner than later. But we are real dependent on the folks up at the lab and other places that are working on fire spread modeling in general, to bring those into the system. So it's a great question, and I hope someday we do have that, because you're right. Right now, that is not something that we capture in the current models we use.